As part of the major remodel, we've installed hardwood throughout this main level, about 1,750 feet of it. Installing nailed down hardwood or any hardwood is not really that difficult. Physically it's a bit challenging, it's a lot of hard work, but as far as the method, as long as you follow a few rules, you'll have good results. For this particular project and for every project I do with hardwood, one of the things I do is open up the material and pull out the directions or the cut sheet, and I look over their specifications. It's typically the same from product to product, but I want to find out if they've got any particular requirements. I want to do this for warranty purposes. Hardwood material, whether it's a laminate or a solid oak like this, you want to make sure you're covered. You want to make sure that if there's a problem with it, that you've done everything possible on your side and everything that their specifications and their warranty requirements are. So one of the things we do on all of our projects with solid woods is we make sure that the wood is delivered and on site in the environment or in the conditioned space that it's going to be installed for a minimum of 72 hours. In this case, I had this product came out of Georgia, and I had it on site for 2 full weeks prior to installation. The next thing that I did was to take a moisture meter, and that's a moisture meter with the pins, the kind that you drive into the wood. The surface meters, they work good for a lot of things, but they don't meet the warranty requirements for hardwood installation. And so I checked the subfloor in multiple locations throughout the house. Again, there's about 2,000 feet on this level and about 1,750 of it all, but the master bath has been recovered in this 3/4 inch solid oak hardwood. So I tested the subfloor at multiple locations. As I did those tests, I took my camera phone, my iPhone, and I took pictures of the moisture meter reading. So that showed the moisture meter and it showed the location. I did that at each location. And then I took the product, I opened up a few boxes and I pulled out a random selection and I tested that. And the different moisture requirements in your region and on the product may vary, but generally speaking, if the subfloor and the material you're putting in are within 4%, then you're not going to have any trouble. If that's not the case, if you're not meeting the requirements, you want to wait. You want to let the product climatize and the environment dry out. A lot of times, particularly in new construction, and it was the same in this one, just prior to the hardwood going on, we painted all of the drywall, and that introduces a lot of moisture into the environment, and you want to make sure that's out of there. Now in this case, because we were dealing with a house remodel, we weren't set up to spray the drywall. We ended up rolling and brushing the entire main level. That introduces a lot less water than when you use a sprayer and you're atomizing it. You're putting a lot of paint on the walls and you're putting a lot of moisture in the air, so you might have to wait a bit longer. But again, the main thing is that it's within the parameters of the product. This product was 4%, and generally speaking, that's what it is, at least for solid products. Some of the laminated products, look at their specifications. You may need less time on site, but again, it doesn't hurt to have it on site longer than the requirement. The more balanced the product is with its environment, the less chance you're going to have of expansion, contraction, getting buckling before pulling up, maybe creaking because the nails have pulled up a little bit. All the problems, the callbacks that you don't want to get. So after that's done, the next thing you want to do is plan your layout. With construction, whether you're framing, doing trim, whatever you're doing, particularly laying tile and laying hardwood, you want to figure out where you're going to finish and work your way backwards. If you do that, if you know where you're going to end up and you work your way backwards, you can plan any adjustments you need to make. You don't want to start on one end and go to the other and find out that the walls aren't square and you're going to have a big taper, whether that's in tile or hardwood. It's really visual. Because this is finished and because this is what your clients are going to see every day, it doesn't matter what the framer did, it doesn't matter what the drywaller did, it's not their fault. As the finish guy, the guy putting in the hardwood, the tile, the trim, all the things that are visible, it's your job to make things look like they're square, to make sure they look like they're level. And sometimes you have to put things in a little out of square to make things look like they're square. It's visual, and so by snapping some lines, so in most situations, this house is a bit unique where the hardwood is running across the narrow dimension of the house. And that's because for some reason, and this is a house that I didn't build, for some reason all the joists are running lengthways. Typically you'll find that the joist layout, at least in most situations, the joist layout is going to be across the narrow way of the house, just because of spans and bearing and all of that kind of thing. You get less bounce and the less span. Oftentimes they can use smaller joists, again, because of the span. But in this case, the joists all ran long ways, which meant I had to run the hardwood across the short distance. And that introduces a little more difficulty for the hardwood install, because that means there's a lot more distance for the hardwood to get out. And it doesn't take very much per row for you to all of a sudden to be way off. If you're running the narrow distance, if you're running long ways, your span, your ability to get off is reduced. In my case, by 2/3, it would have been reduced. But anyway, so this is maximum potential for problems running from one end of the house to the other. Whether we're running in the middle of a narrow house or in the middle of a longer house, the best way, and I didn't do it on this job for other reasons, I started on one end and ended up on the other. But what I have found to be the most productive way, the quickest way, and also the way to reduce your problems, is to go to an important part of the house, middle of the house, as close to the middle as possible. In my case, I've got the entryway here, which is sort of middle. If I went to the middle there and got that first row lined up, squared off the walls, coming from both ways, I could find out if things were out of square. And it's simply pulling a tape measure. The line doesn't have to be, on a layout of wood. It's just finding that center point or that important point. And in my case, if you can see the entry over here, about the middle of the door, that would have been a good place to put a line and then go both ways with the hardwood. By doing so, you automatically cut your ability to get out of alignment in half, because you're going half this way and half that way. And what you'd do is you'd snap that line, you'd measure off major walls to the line at multiple locations both ways, and find out if that line needs to be adjusted to square up with walls that may not be square. And again, you can't make it perfect, but you can make slight adjustments and really fix a lot of problems. You may have one or two walls that are really far out. There's not much you can do about those except work on those when you get to them. But had I did it that way, I would have had that line, made an adjustment, snapped another line in relationship to the walls if I needed to make an adjustment. But once I had determined the angle that I wanted the wood to come off to appear as though it's square to the side walls, then I would have taken a piece of lumber, 2x4, could be 3/4 plywood, anything good and rigid, and put it right on that line and screw it down a lot, every 8 inches into the subfloor, so that it's good and hard. It won't budge at all, because when you put in the hardwood, particularly a nail down like this, you're going to be driving it into it, and you don't want to move that starting point. But have that starting point right on the line, screwed down, and then start your first row of hardwood. And obviously you're following typical layout. You've got, whether you're going for a pattern or whether in this case it specifically said in the instructions to go for a random pattern, so avoid any kind of patterning. And we had cuts from 8 inches that are tongue and groove all the way around, to pieces that were up to 5 feet. And so it was a matter of opening multiple boxes, 4 or 5 boxes, so that the finish matches. This is a pre-finished product, so I don't want to pull all from one box and all from the next box and all from the next. In case there's a slight difference in the finish, want to blend it, and we also want to have the joints staggered at a real random pattern. But so I've got the starting point, I've got 4 or 5 boxes open, the wood pulled out, kind of mixed up, and then I start my layout and I nail that first row, and then I nail the second row, the third row, the fourth row, the fifth row, probably 4 to 6 rows. And then that section's going to be solid. It's going to have a lot of nails in it, and it isn't going to move. Then you can pull up the 2x4 or the 3/4 ply or whatever your material that you use to start off of. You can pull that up, and then what you do is put a spline in. You can make a spline, or usually when you order your hardwood, you can order a certain amount of spline, and you'll put that spline in and turn the wood around and put the groove up against that and go the opposite direction, nailing back into it. So you'll be able to go both directions. If you've got a couple of installers, you can both work in opposite directions, help each other when you need to move material around, but for the most part you can be working in opposite directions and cover more territory. If you're doing it by yourself, then you're not going to save a lot of time, but again, you're going to be starting in the middle and cutting your potential for problems in half. And that's pretty much it. I would continue to, as I nailed off a few rows, I would continue to check. I snap additional lines between the side walls and my starting point, in the same angle as the first line. And again, the perfect angle would be 0 or 90 off of a side wall, but again, that you may have adjusted that a little bit to work with if a house isn't perfectly square. So I would have multiple lines snapped in both directions, and those are just reference lines. They don't need to be a multiple of the material. That helps if you can do that, but the main thing is you've got a reference, so you can check, and you may have 7 or 8 rows to your line, and you may find that you're 1/8 short on one side or the other, because materials do vary in thickness. That it's not a perfect world. So you've got a house that's not perfect, you've got material that's not perfect, but yet you need to make it look perfect. So if you find that you are drifting a bit and you need to bring the other side back up, you can do that over multiple rows, and it becomes less visible. And what I do is, when I find that that's the situation, I take some razor blades out of my razor knife, and I put them with the sharp edge up, the back down, and set it right on the tongue and push the wood together. And I'll do that, a couple of those, and I'll drive the nails in, shoving the wood back up against that blade. The gap that it creates is from eye height, standing up, looking down, is imperceptible. But you do that, leave those blades in, have some more blades. You need a package of those blades. I just find they're, obviously they're steel, so they're not going to compress at all, and it's something most likely you're going to have on the job with you anyway. And the only thing you have to do is be careful, because you've got the sharp edge up, and I actually use pliers once I'm done to pull them out and put them back in the package or back in my knife. But I'll do that, and then the next row I'll do another, leaving the first row of razor blades in. And you can use any kind of shim as long as it's really thin. You can have some made up, you can have you can go to a fab shop and have them make you up some little steel shims that are flat, and then you're not dealing with the edge of the sharp edge of the razor blade. But I'll leave them in the first row, put them in the second row, drive that row in, and the reason I'll leave the first one in, even though it's nailed, is there's enough movement that when you're driving that second row, you could push that first row back tight, and you lose the amount you're trying to gain. So I'd do that, 2 or 3 rows, and then I would check my measurement, and if I'm back on, I'd stop if I need a little more to keep going. But again, it's a good way to just subtly bring it back and stay on your line, so as you get to the other end, because that just with that razor knife, that's a tiny amount that you can't perceive with your eyes from stand-up height. You can imagine just that little bit you wouldn't notice over the distance of 20 or 30 feet. You can be off a 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch. So you want to watch for that and just keep checking. Again, very simple techniques, and obviously the more you do it, the easier it's going to be to see problems and resolve them before you get there. And again, this is going back to what I said in the beginning. Realize where you're going to finish, keep checking to where you're going to finish, and stay on. Don't wait until you're within a foot of your finish point and find out I'm off 3/4 of an inch or I'm off 1/4 of an inch, and then end up with these tapers that you'll see run with the base, and they're very, very visible. And that's just, again, as the finish guy, you're putting down what your clients, what the public, what the people that are buying from you are going to see, and you want to be able to have it look square, level, even if it's not. So hopefully this will help. You can use these techniques for all kinds of hardwood, tile, any kind of product you're covering a big area and you want to make it finish out right. Just remember, find out where you're going to finish, work your way backwards, and just keep checking and do it. And you've got to make adjustments. Do it subtly so that it's corrected or adjusted over a long distance, and the eye won't pick that up. But when you get all the way to the edge, when you've got two lines coming together, you'll want them parallel, because that's what the eye goes to. Out in the middle, you don't notice it, but on the edges you do. So I hope this will help with your hardwood project. Thanks for taking the time to watch.